Over the course of this video, you're going to be blown away by shocking revelations that might just prove a world existed before the biblical flood. I'll be showing you ruins, telling you ancient myths, and exposing you to antediluvian secrets. The pre-flood quarry found in Utah. Even in the Americas, there is evidence of a global civilization that dominated the globe before the flood. Let's go to Utah, to Monument Valley inside the Navajo Nation Reservation near the Arizona border. This place is an iconic symbol of the Wild West. It's a vast wasteland with huge mesas that rise impossibly from the earth. But there's more to the beautiful features than meets the eye. Yes, most of the distinct shapes were made by millions of years of erosion, but there's one specific place in Monument Valley that defies all logic. It's slightly to the north, a place covered with perfectly cut cubes of stone. The dimensions are accurate, the cuts perfect, as if they were made with lasers being blasted from a machine hovering in the sky. You can see the ruins of huge blocks cut from the land, abandoned as if whoever was harvesting these blocks suddenly gave up and left. You have to see it for yourself to believe it. And when you do see it, it's impossible to ignore it. The cuts are all made at 90-degree angles. Everything is perfectly straight. You don't find Lego blocks that fit more neatly into place than these huge stones, most of which weigh more than 900 tons. The craziest part is that there are no obvious constructions nearby. Nowhere in North America is there a ruin that used 900-ton stones to build. If these stones were quarried by an advanced civilization, that's to say, if Utah was used to extract massive stone blocks from the earth, where did they go? What were they used for? Maybe the stone blocks were taken somewhere else, maybe even to a different planet. Anyone who had technology sophisticated enough to pull a 900-ton stone brick from the ground would have easily been able to transport it. It's even possible the stone was quarried by a race of giants or by another race of superior beings prior to a global flood. Maybe whatever the stone blocks were used for was destroyed by the flood. I could go on guessing all day. The harsh reality is that other than these stone blocks, there's no other proof in Utah of an advanced civilization. Unless… no, it couldn't be. Could the strange petroglyphs left behind by Native Americans point to alien visitors? Not far from where the giant stone building blocks were discovered, there are the sandstone cliffs of Sego Canyon. On the cliffs is a spectacular display of Native American artwork. It's like an open-air museum, fantastic petroglyphs painted upwards of 8,000 years ago. There are more than 80 bizarre figures painted on the rough walls of the canyon. What makes these petroglyphs so much more fascinating than others is that they appear to depict alien life forms. The figures on the walls have huge, hollowed eyes. They seem to be missing their arms and legs. They also have unusually shaped heads reminiscent of little green men. What I find extra intriguing is that evidence of human habitation in Sego Canyon begins at the exact same time the petroglyphs were made 8,000 years ago. It's almost as if humans appeared out of nowhere and immediately started painting pictures of haunting figures on the canyon's walls. Could these have been the human slaves used to help aliens in their mining operations? Or do you think I'm totally crazy? Surely there could be a connection between the alien petroglyphs, the archaic people who lived in caves, and the laser-cut blocks. Let me know if you think I'm onto something in the comments. The Stone Age zoo that changed everything. The first civilization appeared at the edge of the Persian Gulf in Mesopotamia just over 5,000 years ago. That is what mainstream archaeologists say. Even biblical scholars like to agree, admitting that Mesopotamia is a perfect match for biblical Shinar, the first civilization that emerged after Noah's flood. Archaeologists have even found the early cities of Shinar/Mesopotamia, places like Babylon, Nineveh, Akkad, Babel, Erech, Kalu, and Uruk. Over the last 25 years or so, archaeologists have been finding something else. They've been uncovering a new series of ruins that suggest an even earlier hub of humanity existed. This was civilization before civilization, real physical evidence of the antediluvian world. The evidence is centered on a site that, if you're a fan of this channel, you've heard me talk about before. But don't go anywhere, because you're going to learn about Gobekli Tepe today in a new way. Archaeologists are starting to call it a Stone Age zoo. Gobekli Tepe is a series of circular stone ruins discovered in Turkey's Anatolia region. Nobody paid much attention to it until Klaus Schmidt came along and started excavating in 1995. Klaus recognized the site's amazing potential. After digging up about 20 acres of ruins, he was able to date the earliest layers to 12,000 years old. This date shocked the scientific community so much that some archaeologists didn't even want to hear about it. A megalithic ruin of this scale 12,000 years ago, when the world was supposed to be in the grip of an ice age? Preposterous. It makes no sense. To give you an idea of how ancient it is, listen to this. You are closer in time to the construction of Stonehenge than the builders of Stonehenge were to the builders of Gobekli Tepe. To this day, not a single piece of evidence has been found at Gobekli Tepe of a settled community. Because of that lack of evidence, archaeologists can confidently say it was not a city, not even a town. Yet Gobekli Tepe is the oldest known temple. I say temple because that's what archaeologists claim it is. The general assumption is that Gobekli Tepe was a religious complex, one built using stones even heavier than the ones at Stonehenge. Some of the megaliths used to build this so-called temple are up to 60 tons heavy. Try figuring that one out and get back to me. The stone circles here, of which there are more than 3, were arranged with a sophisticated understanding of geometry. Also, the stones are decorated with intricate carvings of animals. Snakes, leopards, scorpions, vultures. Over 100 different animals decorate the stonework. Some of the creatures are unidentifiable, unrecognizable to scientists. It isn't the animal carvings that have earned Gobekli Tepe the nickname of Stone Age Zoo. Klaus Schmidt gave it the name because of the more than 40,000 animal remains discovered, scattered amidst the stones. The bones belong to magpies, quails, weasels, foxes, leopards, wolves, boars, goats, sheep, rodent, geese. The list goes on and on. What in the world were all these animal bones doing inside a prehistoric temple? What if all these animals came from Noah's Ark? Gobekli Tepe isn't that far from Mount Ararat, where Noah's Ark came to rest according to the Bible. There's even a giant boat-shaped imprint on Mount Ararat that many believe proves the biblical tale. Maybe Gobekli Tepe isn't pre-flood, but post-flood. Perhaps it was built by Noah and his descendants in the years after they left the ruined ark and went about forging a new human society. And now for number 8, but first it's shout-out time. Big thank you to Kyle Brown for your generous super thanks. Subscribe to join the Origins Explained family. The Belevi Mausoleum. The Belevi Mausoleum was either a tomb built around the 3rd century BC for a king nobody remembers anymore, or a tomb for a ruler who lived before the days of the flood. I'll give you the details and you can make up your mind about this strange ruin. I'll start with what the archaeologists say in the mainstream world. The most popular theory is that the tomb was made for King Antiochus II, ruler of the Seleucid dynasty. He was king of the Hellenistic world from 261 until 246 BC. Now let's take a look at the physical evidence. The Belevi Mausoleum is enormous. It's the 2nd largest necropolis in Anatolia, Turkey. The only one bigger is the mausoleum at Halicarnassus, which is one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. Only the mausoleum at Halicarnassus doesn't even stand anymore. The mausoleum at Halicarnassus was built around 350 BC, designed by Greek architect Satyrus, who was inspired by the even more ancient tombs of the Lycians. It was 140 feet tall and adorned with beautiful sculptural reliefs. However, it's totally destroyed today. In the 12th century, an earthquake toppled it. The Belevi Mausoleum is in better shape, and it might be even older. It's located on an isolated hillside several miles from the nearest roadway. The reason some suspect the mausoleum dates to before the flood is the advanced way it was built. Take for example the chamber and sarcophagus, both of which were carved with expert precision from solid rock. The design suggests technology too sophisticated for the Greeks 2200 years ago. Furthermore, the mausoleum had a 2nd level held up by 28 monumental columns that is currently nothing but dust. The original builder and purpose of the mausoleum are considered a mystery. It's entirely possible Antiochus had himself buried in the remnants of a much older tomb from a society with access to significantly better technology. Number 7. Fish in the Himalayas and the Secret of Genesis. 29,000 feet above sea level at the highest peaks of the Himalayas, there are fish. Fish fossils have been found in the sky, a place you wouldn't typically expect them. Do these skyward fish fossils prove a global flood once washed away the world? Or is it just a matter of geology? Let's take our investigation to the Spiti Valley, a place rife with fossils going back 540 million years. In the village of Hakim, which happens to be home to the highest post office on the planet, scientists have discovered marine cephalopods called ammonites. Climbers who have reached the top of Mount Everest have come down with fossils of sea lilies. So how does it make sense? Scientists say it's all about the way the Himalayas formed. Millions of years ago, a huge geological event took place. The Tethys Sea fit between two massive landforms. These landforms wouldn't be recognizable on any map today. They were like two great islands. Over millions of years, they gradually crashed into each other with such power that the bottom of the Tethys Sea was bent upward into the shapes of mountains. The fish that once populated that sea were dead, preserved as fossils in sediment. As the pressure of the crash gave birth to the Himalayas, the sediment from the seabed was moved onto mountain tops. This is the accepted scientific answer for fish discovered in the mountains. But what does that mean for the flood? Some believe the Himalayas could have been created during the flood. There are a few things you're going to find out in the next couple of minutes that will shock you. Most people you hear these days talking about the biblical flood don't even know what the Bible says about it. If you read the book of Genesis, you'll see for yourself how God's destruction of the world wasn't just about an exceptionally high tide. Genesis says fountains of the great deep broke open. There were earthquakes, volcanoes, and geysers of molten lava. The earth's crust fractured and broke open in an explosive upheaval. The Bible says there were fountains of scalding hot water and lava that lasted 150 days. Noah's flood wasn't just a rainstorm, it was an earthly apocalypse. The Bible states that the entire surface of the earth was churning for nearly 5 full months. Such geological violence could have easily given birth to mountains, like the Himalayas, for example. This kind of destruction could have wiped out whole continents and given rise to new ones. Life forms would have been obliterated, jungles incinerated, and ice caps melted. If there had been a civilization on this planet, they wouldn't have survived the catastrophe. When the dust settled, fish fossils could have been ripped from the bottom of the sea and deposited on mountains. Cities that stood at the surface could have been sucked hundreds of feet beneath the ground to where no living human will ever see them. Victims of the flood. A group of scientists believe they may have found some victims of Noah's flood. Have you ever wondered to yourself, if there was a flood and it did destroy civilizations, where are the bodies? Surely there would be skeletons in the fossil record, right? Now the evidence has been found. Marine archaeologists uncovered proof that people died during a great flood that swept across the Black Sea region. The team used underwater robots to scan 300 feet beneath the Black Sea. In the dark and gloomy landscape, they found signs of destruction 7,000 years old. Robert Ballard was the scientist who made the announcement of this discovery. I would say that Robert is a trustable guy. After all, he is the one who discovered the wreckage of the Titanic. When it comes to a marine archaeologist's resume, finding the Titanic is about as good as it gets. How much do you know about the Black Sea? Most people can't even point to it on a map. Yet it borders Ukraine, Turkey, Bulgaria, Romania, Russia, and Georgia. It was just as important as the Mediterranean Sea when it came to ancient shipping routes. But there's one thing that makes the Black Sea unique. Part of the sea is salt water, and part of it is fresh water, yet there's almost no vertical mixing between the layers. The seawater has practically no dissolved oxygen in it, creating a unique environment for preserving organic material. When a ship sinks in the Black Sea, the absence of oxygen means it's going to be perfectly preserved for a long time. 7,000 years ago, there was no seawater in the Black Sea. It was a freshwater lake up until the Mediterranean rose, pushed its own water through a channel, and a flood occurred. Seawater poured from the Mediterranean into the Black Sea at about 200 times the volume of Niagara Falls. If you've ever seen Niagara Falls during the rainy season, you'll know these numbers are crazy. Not just a few times more volume than Niagara, 200 times more. The Black Sea grew a mile a day. This resulted in about 100,000 square miles around the sea flooding. Whole civilizations that had found a bountiful existence at the edge of the lake suddenly found themselves being swallowed whole. Robert Ballard found some of those unfortunate victims. He was using side-scanning radar aboard his research vessel, Northern Horizon, about 12 miles off the coast of Turkey, when he found a structure. It wasn't a ship, nor was it a piece of trash or a weird rock outcrop. It was a ruined structure. Further investigation revealed tools, ceramic fragments, polished stone, and wooden houses completely collapsed. Fred Hybert from the University of Pennsylvania, an archaeologist who was also on the research vessel, was shocked by what he saw. Fred said the ruined structure came from a culture thousands of years old. This culture was likely obliterated by the Black Sea flood. The question remaining is, how much does the Black Sea flood have to do with Noah's flood? The sunken house is proof that a flood did happen, but its age is unknown. Most biblical scholars agree the flood in the Bible took place 13,000 years ago. Robert and his team seem to think the sunken structure they found is only 7,000 years old. It's also been suggested the Black Sea flood was the inspiration for the flood myth, but whether or not that's true, you'll conclude for yourself by the end of this video. The Gilgamesh connection. For a really long time, Christians believed the Bible was the oldest thing written in the history of humans, period. There was no book older than the Bible, since, it detailed the creation of all things by God. Then, at the end of the 19th century, an enlightenment of sorts crept into the consciousness of human beings. Part of this awakening was thanks to George Smith, a historian who was digging through the archives of the British Museum in 1872. George was looking through clay tablets recovered from ancient sites in Mesopotamia, primarily in Iraq. The tablets were written in cuneiform, the language of the Sumerians. In the 1870s, cuneiform had only recently been translated. George had the job of figuring out what the hundreds of cuneiform fragments said. He was one of very few people who could translate cuneiform into English. He found that most of the tablets were relatively uninteresting. They were things like accounting records, lists of goods, and shipment receipts. George was essentially looking through the collective trash of ancient Iraq. But there was some good stuff in there, like random prophecies given by palace priests. And there were stories. George was one of the first people to start unraveling the complex mythology of the Mesopotamians, a mythology that includes the shocking origin of the Anunnaki. As George translated one story, his eyes started to bulge from his head. He was reading a tale that we now call the Epic of Gilgamesh, written in 1800 BC. That was about 1,000 years before the Hebrew Bible was written. George was shocked because one of the stories in the Epic of Gilgamesh was about a flood. The story goes like this. One of the Anunnaki decides he is sick of human beings. And really, who could blame him? To get rid of all men and women, the god Enlil decides he will induce a great flood. A deluge will wash away the blight of humanity. But another god, Enlil's brother Ea, Lord of Wisdom, comes up with a plan to preserve humanity. Ea reaches out to a man named Utnapishtim and warns him about the incoming flood. To save himself, his wife, the seeds of the world's plants, and animals of every kind, Utnapishtim builds a boat. Torrential rains flood the entire world. When the flooding is over, Utnapishtim sets about rebuilding humanity. This is the same story that's told in Genesis, making the Bible a great big copycat. Research associate Louise Pryke from the University of Sydney said Gilgamesh inspired many later works, books like the Bible and even Odyssey by Homer. Let's not be too harsh with the authors of the Bible, though. Considering how similar the flood is in the Epic of Gilgamesh and the Bible, it's safe to say this was a real event. The Sumerians recorded the flood, as did the Hebrews. Each culture just gave the story a bit of their own unique flair. You've heard of the Dead Sea Scrolls, right? Found amidst those scrolls is a book that was banned from the Bible called the Book of Giants. For a lot more of the grisly details of this text, be sure to check out some of the channel's recent videos on banned biblical books. Anyway, the Book of Giants is essentially about the giants who lived on Earth prior to the flood. One of the giants is named Gilgamesh. It goes to show that the authors of early biblical writings knew all about the Epic of Gilgamesh. It was probably in their libraries. They knew that they were rewriting the Sumerian flood. If anything, the Epic of Gilgamesh's connection to the Bible only makes the story of Noah's flood more believable. A 300-million-year-old secret. A team of Russian scientists were investigating the remains of a meteorite when they came across something unexpected. The meteorite crashed in Russia's Kaluga region in the 1990s. While looking for debris, the researchers found an object that is either a screw or a fossilized sea creature. They can't decide which. The research team is known as the Cosmopoisk Group. They travel around investigating things like unidentified aerial phenomena and paranormal activity. They found a mysterious object embedded inside of a chunk of rock. The rock has been confirmed as 300 million years old. But is the object embedded in it a piece of tech or a dead animal? The team says it's a screw, a simple screw that somehow got stuck in a stone and then fossilized over millions of years. On the other hand, mainstream scientists are saying the object is a crinoid, an ancient sea creature. Crinoids evolved on the planet about 350 million years ago. They look really weird, with a single mouth at their top and then long branch-like feeding arms. There are still around 600 crinoid species alive today. In ancient times, before the dinosaurs evolved, there were far more. Here is a picture of crinoid fossils taken from Wikipedia. The picture on the left shows an entire crinoid, while the picture on the right shows fossilized segments. The fossilized segments look nearly identical to what the UFO investigators found in Russia. I'd like to hear your interpretation of the discovery. Is this a classic misinterpretation of a natural fossil, or did someone 300 million years ago misplace a screw? The Great Wall of Texas. There is a wall in Texas that has been standing for about 400,000 years. It seems to be proof that an ancient pre-flood civilization is hidden underneath the city of Rockwall. Texas is not the first place that comes to mind when I think of antediluvian secrets. Yet the state has one of the best pieces of evidence for a pre-flood society anywhere in the world. Stacked mineral stones that look exactly like a wall are buried throughout Rockwall County and some parts of Dallas County. The stones are pale, long, and narrow. They could be natural strata, but that doesn't appear to add up. The wall looks like, well, a wall. There's no other way to put it. A wall is a wall. One person who has been more perplexed by this mystery than anyone is Mark Russo, former president of the Rockwall County Historical Foundation. He's been wondering about the wall for decades, his curiosity leading him to get seriously involved with the wall in 2005. Mark said the stones align so perfectly that never before has he seen such consistent behavior in an ancient ruin. The wall is so important that the city's named after it. I'm sure it's not called Rockwall for no reason. Unfortunately, though, a lot has happened over the years. Since it was discovered in the 1800s, many pieces of it have been lost. In 1936, a fragment of the wall was excavated and made available for public viewing. Anyone who wanted to check it out could. Geologist James Shelton wrote an unsolicited plea for assistance in re-evaluation of the Rockwall County, Texas Rockwall anomaly, highlighting intriguing features along the rock walls. Shelton noted the presence of linteled portals and archways and openings resembling windows or water conduits. He also documented a stone-lined passage leading to a vaulted chamber. In 1949, a fragment of the structure revealed what appeared to be ancient script, reportedly matching that found on a copper coin recovered from 200,000 to 400,000-year-old soil in Illinois in 1870. This coin is purportedly housed at the Smithsonian Museum today. However, these findings do not definitively prove human construction. It's plausible that humans simply adapted natural formations to suit their needs. As for the origin of the wall, that's the biggest intrigue. Some say it was built by an ancient civilization that predates the Bible. The stones are nearly 500,000 years old. Others say it was part of a Native American settlement, perhaps a large city built by the Puebloans. Then there are the spoil sports like John Giesman, a professor of geology at the University of Texas. He tested some of the rocks in 2012. His analysis revealed that the stones are part of a natural sandstone dike. The wall was likely created when sediment and minerals built up inside fractures, forming a barricade. It could have been due to a volcano or an earthquake. John is convinced the mysterious rock wall is nothing more than natural geology. This is a picture of a home in Rockwall taken by Brandon Wade. That's not an ordinary garden wall you're looking at. It's a real piece of the ancient wall. Does that look like a natural formation to you? Or does that look like the work of a stonemason? You're free to believe anything you want, but I'd like to give you one more piece of info to make your decision of what to believe in more difficult. On a Friday in May of 1886, a very strange article appeared in the Rockwall Success. This was the county's first newspaper. It was reported that a man named Ben Burton unearthed a gigantic human skull while working with his plow. The empty eye sockets were as large as half-gallon cups. A few of the teeth were still in the jaw, each one up to 2 inches long. The paper suggested Ben had discovered the head of a giant, perhaps a Nephilim, maybe one of the Rephaim. Even the newspaper said the skull might have belonged to an antediluvian behemoth. I don't know what happened to the skull. The newspaper said anyone who wanted to look at it could stop by their office, where Ben Burton left it for curious readers. But where it went afterward is unknown. It seems awfully coincidental that a giant skull was found in the same town as a 400,000-year-old wall, confirming the Silurian hypothesis. Let's get away from the Bible for a minute and go deeper back in the world's history. What if an industrial society lived on planet Earth 400 million years ago? According to Professor Adam Frank at the University of Rochester, if humans went extinct today, there might be no trace of us left in millions of years. Even our strongest steels and most radioactive disaster zones will eventually be erased by the geological processes of our planet. Following this reasoning, it's perfectly rational to think an advanced society already prospered on Earth way before the flood. Earth may have seen 3 or 4 advanced civilizations before the rise of Homo sapiens. Adam Frank is calling his new theory the Silurian hypothesis. Sadly though, he doesn't have much physical evidence of it. And by much, I mean 0. Nothing. All he has are cold, hard facts. Facts like human cities cover less than 1% of the surface of the planet. Even with all the archaeological work that's been done, finding a city from the Jurassic period is improbable. Even if researchers could find that mythical city, nothing in it would have survived. Even your iPhone with the best screen protector money can buy will deteriorate in the dirt over millions of years. Alright, but what about fossilized bones? If there was an advanced species, paleontologists would have found their fossilized skeletons, right? Sure, maybe, if they had skeletons. But what if they didn't have skeletons and were more like jellyfish-octopus monstrosities? Oh no, what if the world was dominated by highly intelligent octopuses with opposable thumbs? It sounds like a joke, but how could anyone be sure? Here are some more facts that might surprise you. 95% of all fossils are shallow marine organisms, things like corals. 95% of the rest of the 5% of all fossils are algae and plants and insects. The remaining 0.25% of that is left to vertebrates, typically fish. Now for the good stuff. 99% of the 0.25% of the remaining 5% of the entire 95% are vertebrate specimens consisting of only a single bone. If your brain didn't explode from those percentages, what I'm trying to say is that only a tiny fraction of fossils belonging to vertebrates like mammals are ever found. An excellent example is Denisovans. They were a unique human species just like Homo sapiens and Neanderthals. The Denisovans were alive at the same time as us and our Neanderthal cousins 200,000 years ago. Yet only about 5 small fragmented fossils have been found of the entire species. Trying to find fossils of humanoids 10 times older than Denisovans is a pipe dream. If they existed, all trace of them is gone. The Antediluvian life expectancy. I'm going to tell you something really weird about Benjamin Franklin, and it might freak you out. In 1780, the man with the key and the kite made an outrageous prediction. He said that within 1,000 years, the life expectancy of an average human would increase to about 900 years. Benjamin Franklin thought people would return to the long life expectancies enjoyed by those of the antediluvian world. According to the Bible, people lived a really long time before the flood. Methuselah, Noah's grandfather, lived to 969. Lamech, Noah's dad, lived to be 777 years old. Enoch, Noah's great-grandfather, lived to be a measly 365 years old. But that was only because God brought him to heaven before he could die. Noah himself lived a respectable 950 years. After the flood, people stopped living for a long time. By the days of Moses, people were only living to about 120. Inventor Benjamin Franklin had a hunch things would go back to the way they were before the flood. Benjamin's prediction was in a letter he wrote to Joseph Priestley, an English philosopher. Benjamin wrote that because of how quickly technology was developing, medicine would reach a point where people didn't need to die. 1780 might seem like the Stone Age to you and me, but the innovations were real. Things like steam engines, flushing toilets, and submarines were brand new. 3 years after Benjamin's letter, the first hot air balloon was invented. But what if Benjamin Franklin was sort of correct? Maybe the antediluvian world was populated by people with such amazing technology they could live for 900 years. Wouldn't that be amazing? In Hinduism, their gods lived for tens of thousands of years. The gods of Mesopotamia had impossibly long lives. So did the holy Tirthankaras of Jainism, the ancient Ceres people of China, the earliest Egyptian kings, and Dangun, the first ruler of Korea. Do you believe in a world before the biblical flood? Let me know your thoughts in the comments and don't be shy. Thanks for watching and remember to hit subscribe if you haven't already. Come back soon for more awesome videos.